Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you today. This is Relationship Matters Empowering Conversations podcast. And, I started this podcast last year, and this is the second season. And last year, in the first season, I actually did every single one of them live. I interviewed people live, and we went live on YouTube and Facebook at the time. And it was a great time. I had some great conversations, but found it hard to find guests that could come right at the same time every week. And so this year, when I started the podcast season 2, I wanted to actually pre-record, like it's live, but still pre-record it and have different guests and do it that way and then post later. And so that's what I've been doing. So I haven't actually been able to have a live where I could actually take questions. A lot of times I'll say in the podcast, hey, why don't you leave your comments, leave your questions, and I do check them. It notifies me, and I'll answer those questions. But a lot of times, I think people just feel like maybe it's already done anyway. So I thought, you know what? Over Christmas, I did not get a chance to continue the guest interviews as consistently as I would like to have. I've got some really good guests coming up. I've got some really good interviews that are coming up. But this week I had a gap. And so I thought, you know what, why not just jump on and answer some questions, have a conversation with you. And how we're going to do that is simply you write in the comments. Doesn't matter which platform you're on. I'm shooting live here to YouTube, Facebook, and to LinkedIn for the very first time. And because that's now available. And all you got to do is write a comment in there, and it comes right into my studio, and I'll see your questions and or comments, and let's have a conversation about relationships. Now, this whole podcast is called Relationship Matters. It's based on my book, Relationship Matters, by the same name. And I wrote that book, and I do what I do today because I'm passionate about relationships. I don't know about you, but I sure have seen a change in the climate of our world these days, and conflict seems to be everywhere. And I think sometimes that conflict, including, mental health issues and all those kinds of things, can really cause a strain and a stress on relationships. We have this inflation happening. Finances are a huge catalyst for conflict in relationships, especially in marriages, in family relationships, but also work relationships when there's maybe layoffs looming over your head, or you're not sure. The instability can create instability in your relationships. And I also believe that with social media, and I love using it for positive, for the good, to help people, but there's also we all know there's a lot of negative on social media as well. And so that can really also come into play and wreak havoc on relationships. These polarizing hot button topics these days, I've seen it firsthand drive wedges in relationships and in families and also at work. And I just, I'm just going to say a few real bold things today, and I hope you start commenting. It comes right in here, so I'll see what you write right away, and I'll answer your questions. But I really want to just talk about a few things today, and as I wait for you to ask those questions. And I think that what we're seeing in the world is that what we're not understanding is that the one thing we all have in common is relationships. Every single person has a relationship in their life. And, I always say there's 3 primary relationships. The first one is with God, your creator. The next one is with yourself, and then with others. And when one of those is out of line, it can really affect the others. And so what I want to do is just chat a little bit today about that while I wait for your comments and your questions. And listen, I am fully aware this could be a complete flop in terms of getting you involved in the conversation, or people even finding me live here. I'm hoping people will, but and I've done a little bit of social media about it, but I'm well aware that may not happen. So I'm going to keep talking until something, because then you could still listen back on this podcast and get some good information. Here's what I want to say. Relationships require investment. we need to invest in the relationships. We need to invest in the relationships with our Creator. We need to invest in the relationship with ourselves. What do I mean by that? That's one that's really a mystery to a lot of people. Listen, we all have to relate to ourselves. What is relating to ourselves? It's how we see ourselves. It's how we feel about ourselves, and it's how we treat ourselves. In a very real way, self-esteem is simply how we feel about ourselves. Self-image is how we see ourselves, and self-dignity is how we treat ourselves. And when we don't feel good about ourselves, it's hard to feel good about others. And when we don't see ourselves in the right light, it's really hard to see others in the right light. And if we can't treat ourselves well, we're not going to treat others well. So I really believe that this starts with us learning how to relate to ourselves, between us and our Creator. Now, I don't know where you're all at in your faith journey or what you believe, but I'm saying that you relate to yourself in many ways. You get indicators from other people, what they think of you, what they see you as being. And why I think faith is so important, why it changed my life, is when I discovered what my Creator thought of me, what God thought of me. I realized He loved me unconditionally, and that He in fact, there's a verse in the Bible that says that I'm His masterpiece. And so when I realized that, it actually started to change the way I viewed myself. And so it's really important to get that kind of worked on. And so that, I really believe, emotional intelligence helps you be able to become self-aware, and awareness gives you choice. And I just think that that's really powerful. When you can find that awareness, it's going to give you a massive ability to see yourself correctly and see others. Now, self-image is just that. It's how you see yourself. Now, all of us have gone through the way we were raised, how we were, what we experienced when we were young, and many times that was negative for a lot of people. I had my own negative experiences that way. And what it did was it affected how I saw myself. I wasn't able to see good in me. I wasn't able to see value in me. And I really believe every person it has value. Every single person is valuable. And so when you don't see value in yourself, it's really difficult to see yourself in the right light. Well, how do you heal from that? How do you start to move forward in that? Well, in my healing journey, I discovered that I had to change the way I viewed myself. And I actually have a choice. I don't have to view myself the way others view me. I don't have to see myself in that negative light from my negative experiences. I can actually write a new story. I can actually start to change. And I always use the illustration. You can look out one window in a building or in your home, and you might just see a brick wall next door. But if you want a better view, you got to go look at a different window. So you want to look at a different window, then you might see a beautiful garden. In the same way, in self-image, we need to start seeing ourselves in a different way. Then we need to look through a different lens. We have to see ourselves in a different way. And that's where it starts, because that's how you change your self-esteem. If you don't feel good about yourself, one way to change that is to start seeing yourself in a different light. And I believe what will flow from that also is you'll begin to treat yourself well. I think self-care is super important. I think that it has been maybe maligned out there. I know me growing up, it was believed if I took care of myself or I would love myself, it was a bad thing, that it was a prideful thing, and it was arrogance. You know what? Truly loving yourself, truly self-care actually brings humility. It doesn't bring pride. If you start to see arrogance manifest because you love yourself, then you're not loving yourself. You're probably just imagining, arrogance usually comes from insecurity. And so I really want to encourage you that you actually can see a difference and a change in your life. You can begin the healing journey to see, when you change how you see yourself, you'll begin to realize that you're valuable. When you know you're valuable, you're going to start treating yourself well. And that's how those things interact with each other. And then it goes to our relationships with others. Once I know and I can see myself in the right light and I feel good about who I am, and then I start to treat myself well, the automatic response or the outcome or the outflow of that is that I begin to teach others. I begin to treat them well. I begin to make sure, in fact, my own vision statement is to reveal the value every person possesses. I really believe that everyone has value. I also believe that your value doesn't change based on someone's inability to see it. I'm going to say that again. Your value doesn't change on someone else's inability to see it. And when you understand that, what happens is you'll begin to treat people with value. And when you do that, oh my goodness, it's life changing, because you reap what you sow. You're going to start sowing value into other people because you see value in yourself. It's going to then, they're going to start sowing it back in you. And it's just going to be confirmation for you. And I really believe that that is the process. You want to see yourself in a different lens. If you don't feel good about yourself and you're not treating yourself well, those are indicators. It's not because you're a bad person. Those are indicators that you're not seeing yourself in the right light. And the best place to be informed of how, what your value is from God. But like I said, my audience, lots of people here, I don't know what your faith journey is. I don't, any listeners that come across this podcast, I don't know what you might think about all of that. But in my experience, it was when I came to faith in God, when I came to faith in Jesus, I realized what he said about me. I was more than a conqueror, that I was a masterpiece, that I was, fearfully and wonderfully made. I realized that, wow, I actually have some value. So that's what informed me. And when it changed that, I started to see myself in a different light. When I started to see myself in a different light, I started to treat myself differently. And when I started to treat myself well, that started to change my life. It came into actions. It wasn't just some kind of hocus pocus or, as my friend Chris likes to say, unicorns and fluffy stuff. This actually is very real, and it's very solid, and it's a good solid foundation to build on. And so that's, I really feel that's important. Now, I still don't have any questions or comments, so make sure you put them in. If you are live right now, I know there's a couple of you out there that are live, and so I know there's a few of you. So please join the conversation, add your thoughts into it, or ask questions about anything to do with relationships. I'm here to answer some of those questions. Maybe you got a situation, and you could even say that in the comment. Remain anonymous, but I will read it out and I will answer that question for you if you have a specific question about something you're going through. Now, I want to come back to what I said off the top. There is a lot of conflict out there, and I'm seeing a lot of couples, a lot of families, and even a lot of organizations that are having tension in the family, in the organization. There's tension in the relationships. I really believe that relationships have tension in them, and that it's okay. You see, the word conflict comes up for me, and I know a lot of people have a fear of conflict. And in fact, I got a little slide here. I'm just going to show you. It said, it was from Max Lucado. He says, "Conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional." You see, conflict is often seen as negative. However, it is an opportunity to go deeper in a relationship, and so that is a tremendous opportunity for you to go deeper. And so I think conflict's an invitation to take your relationship to the next level, to go deeper. But if you have a view of conflict that is negative, that it's combat, that means that you will shut down, or you will fight or flight mode. And what happens is then you will resist it, and you will kind of walk away from it. And you're missing an opportunity to go deeper in the relationship. I know in relationships I've had in my life, especially the most important ones, my family, there can be a conflict, and we'll have a conflict. But if we stay the course, if we walk through that conflict together, if we resolve that conflict together, it actually creates a sense of closeness and a sense of intimacy emotionally that I can't get any other way. In fact, I'm going to go so far to tell you that sometimes conflict or suffering in a sense, or hardship, hard times actually strengthens you. It actually makes you stronger. It actually is an opportunity to grow and mature and start to see things a little differently, to start seeing yourself in a different light. Let me tell you, when I first started my healing journey and I started realizing these principles, I grew so much because I realized something. I realized that it didn't define me. My mistakes did not define me. And that conflict does not define me. What will define me is what I choose to do with it. And that's so important. And the two greatest growth times I had in my life, I've mentioned this many times, but the two greatest ones for me were when I started taking responsibility for my actions, for my behaviors, and when I stopped taking responsibility for other people's. It's the same coin, flip sides. When I started taking responsibility for my actions, I realized why I wasn't is because I thought that my actions and my behavior defined me. I thought it was what determined my value. When I discovered that my value was not determined by that, it actually it was okay for me to take responsibility then. You see, I think taking responsibility sometimes you think it maybe is admitting that you were wrong or the other person's right or that you're going to lose and they're going to win. I call that mindset kind of a power over style. You might want, you're thinking that if you don't win, you're going to lose. And that takes conflict from a discovery and an opportunity to go get closer to actually combat, where you're actually hurting each other. And so what you want to do with this is, I really believe, if you can understand it, if you can start to embrace conflict as an invitation to go deeper, take responsibility for your part. But the second side of that coin is that I stopped taking responsibility for other people's parts. You see, it used to affect me deeply when they would say something harsh to me or mean, or they would do something, or if I thought that it was all my fault, if I thought that, I've mortally wounded them somehow, and I took the burden of that on, it kept me from doing the right thing. It kept me from actually growing closer and discovering about myself, even getting to know myself better. I would just ignore it, or I would blame. I'd shift blame and put it on someone else. And so what I learned was, no, I can take responsibility for my part. I don't have to take responsibility for their part or how they're feeling. But when I take responsibility for mine, it humbles me and it puts me in a position where I want them to work it out, that I want them to know they're valued. And so this is where, full circle to the first part of the conversation, this is what I'm talking about when I say conflict is destroying relationships, because we don't understand it. We don't understand it. And so now that you've understood it a bit more, you can actually don't have to fight or flight. You don't have to go into that defensive mode. You can actually take a curiosity position on, and you can actually start to ask questions, to seek understanding, look a little deeper, if you will, into their heart and understand why they're doing the things they're doing, and understand why you're doing the things you do. When that awareness gives you a choice, and it actually empowers you to grow closer and to have a much healthier relationship. And that is really the goal here. So, conflict can be resolved if each party humbles themselves, sees themselves in the right light, is able to take responsibility, and then just talk it through and figure out, using I language. I've taught that before here too. It's like, I language is three components: I feel, I feel, when I feel, and I want. And so when you're in a conflict, you can say, I feel hurt when I'm yelled at. I'll use that as an example. And when I feel hurt, I yell back. I want us to get along and to go deeper in our relationship. Can we agree not to yell at each other anymore? That's a very simple example, because when you use you language, accusatory you language, what happens is it escalates the conflict into combat. But when you use I language and you're explaining and sharing your heart, it actually it actually removes the combat, and it then becomes curiosity. It becomes understanding, and it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. That wasn't the relational message I wanted to send you. I'm so sorry that I did that, because that's not my intention. My intention was simply this. And it opens up dialogue for you to be able to have those conversations. And if you missed the beginning, you got to go back and listen. But the reason I'm having this conversation today is because I'm just seeing so much conflict out there that's turned into combat. I see so many families and relationships at business and work just breaking apart. And we don't need to, folks. We don't need to. We can actually come together. Now, this is also supposed to be a live Q&A. And I said I would talk until somebody asked me some questions, and nobody's commented yet. Come on, just go to the comments if you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. You can make a comment and ask me a question. It comes right into my studio here, and I'll see it live as we go here, and I can answer your questions. I want to be able to answer questions for you today about relationships, about how, and maybe something I've said sparked something here already, and you could ask questions about it, and there's no questions off the table. You can ask me anything. If I don't know, I'll tell you, but I will try to answer every single one of them. And so I just want to remind you, let's do that. Let's do that now. And it would be great just to have you be part of this conversation. I really believe that I call this podcast, besides Relationship Matters, Empowering Conversations. So I would really like this rather to be a conversation than a teaching, but I will keep going if you want to keep going without asking questions. You might just get me to talk a little longer, but I'd really like to answer some questions. So go ahead and post in there. And listen, I'm an experimental type of guy. I don't mind taking risks. And I don't mind doing it wrong too. I might have done this whole thing wrong. If you got some advice around that, I'm wide open. My ears are open. Go ahead. Let me just do a little commercial here. You can go to my website. I'm just going to put it up here for you. Markgordon.ca. It's simple, my name and .ca. And you can look on there and find out more information about workshops that I teach. I do workshops, I do trainings, and I do all those kinds of things. All right. Okay. Thank you, Licky. Here we go. Licky's a good friend of mine. He owns a company called Blind Spot Global, and they do some excellent leadership development around awareness advantage when you have awareness. So he's asking, speak about respect in relationships. Thank you, Licky. Yeah, I think respect is a huge thing. Another word I use, the fifth pillar in my 5 pillars of a healthy foundation, is called honor. And honor, the word honor, means to highly respect. So absolutely, I believe that in relationships, no matter whether these are at home, with your loved ones, or at work, respect is a massive thing. In fact, I would say it's almost a lost art today. Certainly, the lost art of honor for sure. And I just believe that when we honor each other, we create an environment that is a healthy environment for relationships to flourish. In fact, I've been talking about conflict. When you can respect through conflict, when you can honor somebody through conflict, you actually will see that conflict. That is one of the mechanisms to help you bring a positive outcome in that conflict, to get closer, more emotionally intimate. What disrespect does is it breaks down trust. Trust is another pillar in the healthy foundation. When you disrespect somebody in a relationship, what happens is you will break down trust. It's hard to trust somebody that disrespects you. And, we all get angry, we get mad, and we say things we don't mean. And we say things that maybe we wish we hadn't. Here's another little tip. When we say something disrespectful and something we didn't mean to say, think of it this way. We are sowing a seed into our relationship with that person, a negative seed, a weed, if you will, in the flower garden of that relationship. We're actually planting a weed. And if we sow too many weeds, that garden will be choked out. The life of that relationship will get choked out. What happens a lot of times is we'll get angry, we'll say something in the moment, we don't mean it, but it comes out. Or it's things we've been harboring in our hearts and we've never talked about. You see, if you do all the other things I've said in this video, in this time, you wouldn't need to actually worry about this. But we all say things that we don't mean. Here's a tip about respect in relationship. When you disrespect, go back and correct it. In other words, often what happens is we start to kind of move on. Maybe it's 2-3 days later, we make up. We just kind of don't talk about it again. And when we have words carry life and death, when we disrespect somebody with our words and our actions, and we don't go back and undo them, we have sown that disrespect into the foundation of our relationship. It creates gaps and holes in our foundation, and eventually it'll weaken it. And so what you want to do is you want to put the mortar back into the foundation. You want to go back and say, you know what? I take responsibility for disrespecting you. That is not true. Reverse the curse. That is not true. You are very, whatever it is, lovable. You are very kind. Whatever words you use to cast the curse or the speak disrespect, do the opposite. Redeem it. Say, I respect you for this. I respect you because of that. Now that's what happens is a lot of times we don't go back and fix it. We just say it. We just kind of forget about it. When you're in a relationship, especially an intimate one, you need to go back and say, you know what? I take responsibility. I apologize for disrespecting you. And I want you to understand where it came from. And that's where you can then add the language in. I just felt super misunderstood and I reacted and I don't want to react anymore. I am so sorry. And reverse that curse, exit out. And that will really help you. But on the positive side, use respect to sow seeds of health, of beautiful flowers in that garden. Sow seeds, put mortar back into your foundation or build it up even stronger by showing honor to somebody, high esteem, high respect. Show respect to them and they will flourish. And you know what happens is when you are respectful, you get respect. Respect is earned. It's not just given out. Now, I do respect people because it's part of who I am. I don't have to. I often say that you don't have to honor somebody negative behavior. Let's say you don't have to honor someone if they're being mean or disrespectful to you, but you have to honor the relationship and you have to honor the person. Maybe not the behavior, but you honor the person. So you respect the person, and then you can actually address the behavior. If you don't honor the person or don't respect the person, you haven't earned the right to adjust the behavior that is coming at you. And you've taken your power away. You've actually, what you do is you give your power to them. By the way, unforgiveness also gives them the power. So if you can, when you disrespect somebody, you're giving them your power. So if you want to be a person of honor, you show respect, you treat others with respect. And what happens is you become an honorable person, and then people will respect you and it will come back to you. It's so powerful. So thank you, Licky, for asking that you got me on a rant there. And please, other people, ask questions on whatever platform you're on. You can ask a question. It comes right into my studio here, and I will answer that question. I'm going to go for about another 10 minutes, and then we will wrap this one up. But I hope, even if you're listening to this later, I hope this is helping you. I hope it's giving you some tools and just some ideas, maybe some thoughts you haven't had before. It's so hard in the heat of the moment. It's so hard in a world that is full of conflict. I will say this, one of the things that keeps people in a disrespectful place is quite often is insecurity. It's the same thing. I always say, if you show me the most arrogant person in the room, I'll show you the most insecure. Same way, if you show me the most disrespectful person in the room, I would show you the most insecure. Disrespect comes from insecurity. Respect comes from confidence. And when you truly have a proper confidence, it humbles you. It doesn't make you proud. It doesn't cause arrogance. It actually humbles you. You're so grateful. There's so much gratitude there. You can't help yourself. And so I think respect is huge. I think it's confusing, by the way. Here's a little tidbit for parents and also family life. I think it's I've heard it many, many times. Well, my husband or my dad or my mom or my wife, they show everybody else respect. Like they are respecting everybody we come into contact with, but at home, they don't respect me. And that imbalance brings confusion in children, and it brings confusion in your relationship, if I could put it that way. Whatever the relationship is, it's going to bring confusion when they see you respecting in one place and not in the other. So respect has to become a core value. It has to become part of who you are. Honor is one of my highest values that I live by. And so that respect comes out of that. And so that's good. All right, my wife, thanks for watching, honey. That's awesome. How do you unseed the words you have planted? Very good question. And I answered a bit of it, but I'll go a little deeper. How do you unseed them is you acknowledge, first and foremost, that you spoke them out of turn, that it wasn't from your heart. And then you just simply confess that, and then you tell them, actually seed in the truth. So truth will set you free. So what you do is, by way of example, if you said, you're always angry, you're always doing this, or you never pay attention to me, and that's kind of like a curse, if you will, of speak. You might go back and say, I was upset, I said these things, I'm sorry I said them. I want you to know that you do take care of me, or that that you do show kindness. You want to move in the opposite spirit is the best way to describe that. I hope that answered your question, honey. Licky, another one. Why do people have a hard time apologizing for their behavior? Does that make them weak? Great question, Licky. Thanks again. You know what? That's a great question. Why do people have a hard time apologizing? I think it's kind of connected to what I said a little earlier. Sorry, I just kicked my table. It's connected a little bit to what I was talking about earlier, where a lot of times, if we have to admit to our bad behavior, it means that shame comes in. Shame will prevent us from being able to admit that it was our fault or that we behaved poorly. And I think part of that is because it will confirm that our worst fear about ourselves. Deep down, when we have a low self-esteem, deep down when we have insecurities, what happens is if we admit that we did something wrong, it actually is kind of confirming the worst that we think of ourselves. How you reverse that is you've got to work on that self-esteem. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you need to build up yourself and care for yourself and understand that your behavior, we all sometimes mess up. We all have bad days. Taking responsibility for my behavior actually points more to my identity than the behavior itself. Actually, my value will shine through when I actually take responsibility for it. But I think that's why people don't. And you ask if, does that make them weak? Weak, I don't know if that's the right word, but it gives their power away. So I guess in that sense, yes, it makes them weak only because they are not operating at their maximum ability or their maximum identity. They're acting out of wounds and hurt and pain rather than out of their heart and who they are, who their identity is. And so I really actually, it does weaken them. I wouldn't want to call anybody weak, but it does weaken their ability to, certainly weakens their ability to relate and to connect. And it certainly hurts the connection. It hurts the relationship connection, the emotional intimacy that you would have with that person. And so I think sometimes I think they're scared if you take responsibility for your behavior, that you're admitting you were wrong. And that means they're right. Well, you can be right and wrong at the same time. You might be right about the facts, but wrong in your attitude and how you treated them as a result. So I think you can take responsibility for your behavior without admitting, unless you did do something, then you should admit it. But I think you can admit that I don't mind taking responsibility. For example, if I've hurt Sandy's feelings and I didn't mean to, but I did somehow, and it might be because she's having a bad day. It might not even be my fault. I might have just said something the wrong way because she's in a bad mood. But I don't have a problem humbling myself and saying, honey, I'm sorry that my words hurt you there. That wasn't my intent. And I love you and I want to encourage you. And so when you do that and you take responsibility, it really is powerfully, you know, yeah, like you said, interesting how the opposite actually occurs. It builds trust by being vulnerable. Absolutely. That's so good, Licky. It's exactly it. When you take responsibility, you become trustworthy. And when you are trustworthy, you are safe. When you're safe, the other person feels secure. When they feel secure, it takes their insecurity away. So now they can be themselves. And what it does is it enriches the relationship. And so slow down, listen. We have one mouth and two ears for a reason. We want to actively listen to the heart of the person and see what's going on deeper down. Again, it might not be your problem. It might be their problem, but why wouldn't you want to be part of the healing journey? Why wouldn't you want to be the agent of healing and an agent of love to be able to help them through that, even when it's not your fault, even if it's being pointed at you? I'm humble enough and I'm strong enough that I could take some of that if that makes my partner or makes somebody that I'm working with, if I can become trustworthy enough that it opens up their heart and then I can help. Why wouldn't I want to take that position? Why do I need to defend myself? I don't need to when I have healthy self-esteem, a healthy self-image, and healthy self-dignity, which is how I care for myself. Wow. There you go. I went on another rant, but that's good. I really appreciate both Licky and Sandy for helping me out here with some questions. And for you, those of you that have been watching, I really hope that this has been helpful. I want to just say again, this podcast drops weekly during the season it's in. Sometimes it's Christmas. There was a week between I missed, but keep an eye out. Subscribe. If you're on YouTube channel, subscribe there. If you're on my Relationship Matters page on Facebook, just hit the like button. If you're on LinkedIn, make sure you follow me there, and you'll get updates on this stuff. And you'll see when these podcasts. You can also go back. The podcasts are posted both here in on these, on whatever platform you're watching, but it's also audio only on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. You can find it. You can find these podcasts on all those places. Just put Mark Gordon Relationship Matters. It usually pops up, and you can listen to the audio version of these. And I've got some fantastic interviews with great people over the 2 seasons. And so well worth going to listen to a few of those. And I'm having more guests coming up, and I'm going to be talking about some really deep conversation. This year, I wanted to go deeper into the real fabric. Hey, thanks, John. I see you're watching there. So readily powerful, make it, make love it. Or I love it. I'm not sure what you're saying there. Thanks, John George in Belize. He's a fantastic leader in the country of Belize. And so, I want to make sure that you get every opportunity to listen in on the podcast. And I know there's millions of them out there and thousands of other. What you're going to get from mine is just a very raw and honest conversation with some people. They're generally 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And so I hope you look them up and subscribe to all the different channels. That will help me out. And I would really appreciate your help. And lots of stuff coming up in the near future. And I'll keep you posted on all of that. My website's being revamped. I'm strengthening strategic partnerships with different people and organizations, and that's going to just bring more benefit to all the people that are in my sphere. If you need coaching, if you need a speaker, or you want me to come and do the Relationship Matters full workshop, you got a little taste of it today. I do a whole weekend of this. If you ever want to book me, just hit me up. You can go to my website, markgordon.ca, and find me there, or on any of these platforms that you're finding me on now. Well, I think that's the end of our time. Thanks so much. I hope this was helpful. Share it out. If you know somebody that needs to hear this, please share the video, share it out amongst your social media, or just send it directly to a friend that you know might be in need or they could use this kind of conversation. Thanks for everybody that participated. Thank you to all of those that listen, and we will see you next time. My next podcast will drop probably in about a week, and we'll go from there. So we'll talk to you later. God bless you all. Bye.